This episode is brought to you in part by Optimal Workshop. Optimal Workshop's UX research platform empowers you to build the world's best user experiences. Test, benchmark, measure, and make evidence-based decisions with confidence. Go to userdefenders.com/OW and try their powerful tools for free today. This episode is also brought to you in part by Ping Pong, the user research platform that brings the voice of your users into the design process. Run user interviews and user tests with highly engaged testers all over the world so you can iterate faster and build better products. Stay tuned to learn how you can get 25% off your first purchase.
The production side of design will more or less be automated, so it's our job and our goal to set parameters and goals for algorithms to determine the behavior of systems. So our day-to-day is less of like drawing out design comps and drawing out wireframes and whatnot. It's more spending time defining the behavior while the machines can output the design, move the pixels based on our guidelines and pre-existing templates.
Welcome to the User Defenders podcast, where we interview UX superheroes who fight for the users in order to inspire and equip you to do the same. And now, here's your host, Jason Ogle.
Greetings, User Defenders. Welcome to episode 65. Today I got to talk to Microsoft UX designer Jasmine Oh, all about whether AI will replace us as designers. This was a really fascinating conversation, and frankly one that made me a little nervous at times, if I'm being honest. We get into the weeds on what it means for us as designers, like where do we go from here if this is indeed true? How long do we have until the job of design that we know today will go away? This was a really interesting one that you'll definitely want to listen to all the way through. You do that anyway though, right? Please? Before we get to the episode, I want to tell you, because I feel like a lot of you may not realize that User Defenders, we have a store on the website where you can buy swag with the UD symbol on it and logo. Like there's hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and also the special Your Ego is Not Your Amigo t-shirt. And I actually just put it on a hoodie recently. So I wanted to direct your attention there. Again, userdefenders.com/shop. Check it out, and I'd love to have you rep UD wherever you happen to be. I don't make a very large margin off the products. If it seems expensive, honestly, it's just that they're super high quality products. There you go. There you have it. And without further ado, please enjoy this exciting, compelling, and even a little scary, possibly, episode with Jasmine Oh. I have with me today Jasmine Oh, and Jasmine is a UX designer in the Windows product direction team at Microsoft, which is an incubation team is helping define the future vision of computing. That sounds super exciting. I can't wait to learn more about that. She named herself after Jasmine the princess from Aladdin. Wu Zheng is her official name, and I probably totally didn't pronounce that right, but it means friendship in Korean. Welcome officially, Jasmine, to User Defenders podcast. I am super excited to have you on the show today.
Hey guys, I'm also very excited to be here.
I'm so glad that we're going to have this time today, because I feel like this conversation, this is one of those ones, I'll be honest with you, Jasmine, I really was kind of treading lightly on this because I feel a little bit worried about this, about this subject matter. I'm not going to lie. I feel a little worried. And you wrote an article, and that's what drew me to you. And your article is all about how AI, it's not a matter of if it will take our jobs, it's really a matter of when, just a matter of when it's going to happen. And that scares me. That scared me a little bit. But before we dive into your article and really unpack all of this is really an important one, Defenders. It could very well affect kind of what we do and where our roles evolve as designers, that we know as of today as designers. So let's dig into what you're doing at Microsoft, because that sounds really fascinating. It's so interesting that you're helping define the future of computing at Microsoft, when Microsoft was the beginning of computing, of personal computing. In 1975, the year I was born, ironically, the personal computer revolution began, where Bill Gates and Paul Allen, they used the Intel microchips to create the first personal computers. And I'm really fascinated to know, Jasmine, what are you working on? Can you talk about it? What that means, helping to define the future of computing at Microsoft?
Yeah, so I know it's super broad, but basically we're a team trying to help understand how Windows could evolve with the emerging trends. So as you said, like Windows was the first like personal computing. It has come a long way, and it used to be that the operating system is the focus of a device. Like people used to go in and buy licenses of Windows per version and buy apps for the device. And now that's not the case. People just pay for devices and the OS comes in the device for free. And the true value and experience really lies in the services that we access. So now looking into the future, the premise of cloud is that you can access your content anywhere on any device. And it's totally shifting how we approach computing. So we try to brew new ideas about how computing is evolving and how that mindset is shifting. So that's pretty much what we're working on.
Fascinating. Does any of this involve using AI?
Yeah, and a part of that, like the trend is also not about the user going in and digging through your computer and finding the stuff you need. We have so many like smart devices, and people expect the device to sort of know what you are going to do. So the part that we incorporate intelligence and AI into our designs is mostly for personalizing content and surfacing like the right content for you at the right time. And like a simplified example of that is, let's say a person is working on a presentation, and in the past few weeks, every time he goes into work in the morning, this person checks his email, opens up PowerPoint, view his research notes on Word. Next time he opens the same presentation file and he opens up, File Explorer or Start menu, which is like a launcher, then the system bubbles up the associated documents in email, so you can just jump right in instead of you opening up the apps one by one. That's a grossly simplified example, but those are some of the things that we try to do so that the computer and the system is helping you basically get stuff done more efficiently.
I can't envision that. I'm not working in this capacity that you are, and I'm just trying to understand how this is going to what this is going to look like. Is there, like, you gave us a little bit of a snapshot into it, but what are like do you have like maybe a 5-year sort of view of kind of where this is going and what this is going to do to computing? I mean, like, I'm just really curious. I'm trying to get kind of a better vision of sort of what our computers, like I think of my laptop. Like, my laptop is the only computer I can really envision right now. I mean, of course, I've seen Minority Report, and all of us have. A lot of us, I think I would say, have seen Minority Report.
Yeah.
And that's like the future. I mean, that's still like, that was done so long ago, and yet we still don't have something like that in place. And I'd argue too that it's probably not the best user experience either. Like if you hold your arms up for even like 2 minutes, you get really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So obviously the gorilla arm, thing, the research around that's not a good experience. But I have a feeling we're moving into a lot of the other things we've seen in that movie, a lot of the other scenarios where like there's basically screens and they're dynamic, there's screens everywhere. And I think Corning did a Day of Glass video, which was super compelling. They did that quite a while ago too. And you just kind of go like, oh my gosh, we are really heading into this sort of era. I mean, like Elon Musk, like putting like a large part of the dashboard is a big like iPad, is a big tablet. It's a screen, and it basically controls most of your vehicle operation as far as I understand. And so I'm just trying, like, I feel like we're moving into this world, and I think the augmented reality thing too. Like, I saw a video recently where somebody was in their car, and I guess it was like a prototype for augmented reality. And then all of a sudden on the windshield, there's all this interface everywhere. It's kind of like Iron Man's mask. And I'm like, I don't know if this is good. I don't know if this is a good thing. Yeah. We're already struggling enough. But then you kind of, I'm getting probably way ahead of things. But, then you go like, well, the cars are going to drive themselves, so don't worry about it. And then we'll finally be able to do all our texting safely in our cars that we do anyway. Very unsafely. Yeah. So I'm jumping ahead here, but where does kind of what you're working on with the operating system, where does that kind of fit into where things seem to be heading right now with some of the things I touched on?
Yeah, I think the crux of it, like a 5-year vision, the crux of it is that ownership of device no longer matters. So you look at...
What do you mean by that?
You can literally access computing anywhere on any device, as long as there is a screen and access to the cloud. You can go to the airport and maybe there's a screen there and you log in. Maybe if you're a Microsoft user, you would just log in with your Microsoft account and all your content is there. You can access your stuff. And with the augmented reality, with the VR, MR especially, the device and the screen doesn't really matter. It's just part of your physical environment. One example that comes into my mind right now is like Stadia at Google. It totally broke the myth that to be a gamer, you need this like powerful, robust device, like probably an Alienware with like 3 fans. Like that's no longer the case. You can do games, like it's a cloud gaming service, so you can play games, as long as you have access to the internet. And I think that's sort of where computing is going as well. Like you can access your content anywhere, and it's no longer tied to your device or your phone.
How does the recognition work, right? Like I'm so sick of typing my password in, and I'm so sick of like having to remember 8 different passwords, right? Or
yeah,
like what does that look like? How does it know it's you? Like, are we talking retinal stuff here? Like, are we talking like Black Mirror stuff? God help us.
I know, God help us, please. But I think we already have those, right? We have fingerprint, we have in PCs, we
biometric.
Have Windows Hello. So it literally takes a split of a second to recognize your face and you can log in.
Right. This is crazy. We're just getting started, folks. Like I said, you wrote an article. It's the title of it. It would seem very clickbaity.
Yeah.
Once you start reading the article, it's like, this is not clickbait, folks. This is like kind of a reality that we need to sort of look straight in the face. Mm-hmm. And we need to kind of start thinking about what this means for us as designers, as product designers, as UX designers. So the title of your article is, Yes, AI Will Replace Designers. And then the subtitle is, But Here Are 3 Ways We Can Work with AI for Future Success. So it's like, the first is like that fear, uncertainty, doubt, but then there's like, but here's the hope, here's the light. In the darkness, right? So again, Defenders, check out the article. Be sure to link to it in the show notes. But basically, what I think one of your main points in the article is how the role of designer will evolve from basically being creators to curators.
Yep.
And in your article, you mentioned the 3 evolving roles of designers, and the first 2 basically becoming non-existent in the not too distant future. And so I'm curious. So let's kind of go through these. I made some notes. Number 1 is specialized designers. For an example, there'd be graphic designers or web designers. The next category is number 2, product designers. And those are kind of the T-shaped designers with a breadth in product strategy and visual design and interaction design. I feel like that's really where the majority of today's digital designers are. They're in that kind of product/UX designer, however you choose to look at it. And then you go on to say there's a third category of designers, and I can see a lot of folks already kind of moving into this sort of thinking. And you call it the number 3 being system designers. And these are folks who set parameters and constraints and determine behavior of automated systems. I can already see a huge shift, just even looking at let's see, specialized designers and product designers, I can see a huge shift in how we do our work for the better in using design systems, right? Especially if you're working for an enterprise company that has multiple web presences and they've got thousands of buttons, thousands of headers, thousands of, of different of treatments that they're reusing, and that programmers are basically reprogramming often from scratch, when it's like, wait, why don't we just make this a component? And why don't we just make this a system, right? So I can see that already, that thinking already for the good, again, helping a lot of us, helping our businesses save money, right? Helping us be more nimble as companies and using that time to kind of innovate that we would spend just doing the grunt work. All that to say, basically your implication is the first two categories are going to be extinct. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And then system design. And so basically, I want to ask you, how long, first of all, do you think how long do we have before our jobs as specialized and or product designers will become extinct?
I would say, clarification. I don't think they will become completely extinct. I think like a specialized knowledge in, visual design or motion design, whatever your vertical is in the T will always be valued. But just like there's much less demand for graphic designers nowadays and much more demand for UX, I think maybe in the next 5 years, system designers will be, much more valued than specialized designers or product designers.
Okay, that I get that analogy. That does make sense to me. And I won't hold you to this because, anytime you ask somebody what the future of design looks like, and I used to ask that question as like part of my format of this show, and then that's a really hard question to answer. But if you had to guess how long before the VHS tape becomes a DVD or a Blu-ray, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this is the same idea here. We're eventually forced. Apple's done a really good job of forcing their customers to adapt to whatever dongles or whatever they want you to buy to make their product so they can make thinner, faster computers. Right? So, pardon, I'm an Apple person and you work at Microsoft. So I feel like Steve Jobs versus Bill Gates here. No, I'm just kidding. But that's all I know. But Apple's done a really good job of really forcing their customers to change. And I have a feeling that what you're working on at Microsoft is basically probably doing similar things where it's like, we're not trying to take this away from you, but we're trying to help you get here. In the future, you say that, and you believe that designers as we know it, like especially the first two categories, will become behavior or system designers. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
So what I'm saying is that the production side of design will more or less be automated. So it's our job and our goal to set parameters and goals for algorithms to determine the behavior of systems. So our day-to-day is less of like drawing out design comps and drawing out wireframes and whatnot. It's more spending time defining the behavior while the machines can output the design and move the pixels based on our guidelines and pre-existing templates. Have you heard of the Buchanan 4 Orders of Design?
No.
So I came across this while I was researching for the article, but Richard Buchanan, I think he was the head of Carnegie Mellon design program, and he's a professor somewhere else now. But basically, he defined this 4 orders of design, and he said the first order, which like emerged in the first half of the 20th century, is about communication with symbols and images. So the design for that is graphic design. The second order is focused around things like tangible artifacts, and the designer for which is industrial designer. Now designers have a wider scope. So the locus of the third order is action. So if you think about the designers now as interaction designers, designing for experience and not for things. And he's saying, and I think what we're headed towards is the last order, which is thought. And the design associated with it is environmental design. So the focus of design is moving towards systems, which incorporates like all of the other orders of design, and is essentially the integration of information, artifacts, interactions in environments. And we already see this, all the four orders converging in areas like VR and MR. Like you're designing for the experience in a physical and digital place, and symbols, artifacts, things, experience, all of those come together.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Is that a book, or is that was that a thesis?
No, I think he talked, I came across it in a bunch of articles when I was researching about AI and the future of UX. And a bunch of people referenced it, and I think it's a theory. But when I saw it, and he had this nice, neat little diagram of like the rings expanding, I was like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Imagine a world where people don't have to feel lost, confused, or frustrated while trying to find and do things online. Now imagine a world where the right things are in the right places. Websites, apps, and intranets where people can easily find the things they're looking for. Optimal Workshop empowers you to build the world's best user experiences. Test, benchmark, measure, and make evidence-based decisions with confidence. If you're ready to create better experiences for your users, go to userdefenders.com/OW and try their tools for free today. So kind of continuing on with the automation side of design, I read a book by Kevin Kelly called Inevitable, and he talks a lot about this same thing and even just the title of the book is compelling. It's like, okay, this is inevitable, right? Like I mentioned the VHS tapes going to DVD, going to Blu-ray, going to digital, everything's digital. Like, it's like, I spent so much money on Blu-rays and now I'm like, why did I do that when I should just be buying them on iTunes or something, or like on, through some other like Prime or whatever, they have a shelf life, right? Any physical media like kind of has a shelf life. All it takes is one 3-year-old to kind of throw it like a Frisbee and it's done. Right. And so it's like, there's that whole thing that's happening here, and I can see it happening, and I could see a lot of good in it. And then I could just kind of see like the concerned parent in me. Like, I'm a parent, I'm a sole provider for my family. I have 6 kids, and I get a little worried about some of this stuff, to be honest with you. And he's saying this is inevitable, folks. This is inevitable. This is going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So he's trying to encourage us by saying, a lot of folks are so worried about losing their jobs. I get it, but don't fear, because there will be a ton of new jobs for us to do. Yay.
Yeah.
Right? But he never speaks to what those are. He never says, like, here's the jobs that we're going to do as a futurist, right? I mean, that guy has a really interesting lens into the future, kind of like the Black Mirror director. Like, I don't understand how that guy just kind of has this vision. I could see, the thing that scares the crap out of me is I could see a lot of the things that he's showing in those episodes. I can see us heading there, and it kind of scares me. It's dystopia.
Yeah. It's too close to our future.
Oh my gosh. Right. Exactly. So he doesn't tell us what jobs we'll be doing. And I'm worried. We all fear the unknown. It's just natural. It's a part of our human genome. So I'm curious, and I know you've got a pulse on this. You've done a lot of homework, and you're working in the trenches on kind of what this looks like right now at Microsoft. And so, like, I'm curious, just from your perspective, like, if you are in the same camp as him, which I have a feeling you might be, what does the future designer look like? Like, what's their day-to-day going to consist of?
Yeah, I totally share the same anxiety. And I don't know for sure, but I think the future of designer will probably encompass more roles as a designer. Like, we work with a bunch of stakeholders now. Like, we work with researchers, we work with writers and PMs and engineers in parallel. I think in the future, we will still work with researchers, but us as designers would even get closer to users and participate in more research and even run research studies ourselves. So instead of like relying on researchers, and I think the power of AI is that it can help us gather a bunch of inputs and understand, identify patterns and understand data. So us as designers, we could set parameters to gather data and gather user feedback, and we would still need UX researchers to help us analyze the data. but it would be part of our job to identify, why people are feeling certain ways or what people are doing, more or less like the quantitative data for that. And also, I think, as I said before, like maybe it's a good thing that our craftsmanship is less required and we can spend more time on more meaningful things like making decisions and understanding user intent, and less so spending time on, cranking out pixels and cranking out comps. Is that still very abstract?
You filled in some blanks for me. Like, there's some neural pathways. I can feel it in my brain just kind of connecting here as you shared that. I'm a student of psychology, my own personal studies, and I've been learning a lot just existing in this ever-evolving artificially intelligent world we live in. I have seen the value of soft skills, and I'm a big evangelist for it. Because honestly, like, no matter how intelligent our machines get, and I think we all know that it's happening. And I mean, even Elon Musk is like, I fear the future of artificial intelligence. When these machines become intelligent enough to start making their own executive function, where they start realizing that they can kind of take control and make decisions and even self-replicate and things like that, like, that's worrisome. So I just feel like the more human we can stay in an ever-evolving machine-driven world, the more valued we will be in this work. What are people trying to do with these robots? They're trying to make them more human. Whose job is that? It's humans' jobs to make these robots more human. So there's that. And you gotta have those soft skills to be able to try to teach a machine empathy, which honestly, I don't believe that no matter how well programmed a machine is, they will never truly be able to empathize with a human. And that's where I go all in on that. And so I can see, and it just reinforces my message all the more for defenders listening, designers, like, really go all in on being more human. The more technology that we get, the more human we need to be. And the more we need to set healthy constraints around our use of technology. Because it was mentioned in the scriptures long ago, the God we serve is the God we will become. And that was in the Old Testament long ago. It was written, and it's still true today. And I see a lot of us. I have kids. I have millennials, in my life, and I know that's just that. This is the culture today. We're all looking at our phones. I do it too. I try to set healthy constraints around it. But the more we become slaves to the technology instead of masters, I think the less human we become, the more we become like these machines. And that scares me. I see a huge loss of empathy, especially amongst younger people. I'm getting on a soapbox here, but I'm going to do it. I see a really large loss of respect for elders amongst younger people. There used to be a lot more respect for people who, like your elders, right? Like your grandparents or your parents or somebody in an authority position. Like, I see a really large loss of respect. That concerns me. And so I think that, and I believe wholeheartedly, the more human we can stay in a world that's becoming ever increasingly robotic and technical, the more advantage we'll have in the workplace. And this lends itself to your claim about behavioral design. The dots are connecting for me. And hopefully you too, defenders listening, that the more human we can stay, the more we can go on in empathy, having empathy for ourselves first, and personal growth. We can't give away what we don't have. I say that all the time, and it's true. We can't give something that we haven't first received. And if we don't have empathy for ourselves, we don't put our oxygen mask on first, we can't help other people. We can't create technology that's empathic, that is run by machines. That's my biggest concern. There's my rant.
Damn, that was so inspirational. I needed that.
Thank you.
That was great.
I love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like, we're designing for humans. So I say that, yes, AI will replace designers, but like in the end, like the people who are going to be using our products are human. So, in the beginning, I felt the same anxiety, but I think we should feel empowered because, as you said, at no point in time can machines really surpass our emotional and social intelligence. We're trained to use our emotions to connect with other people, and it's just part of our DNA. It's just part of our humanity and our history. So naturally we're an expert at detecting and decoding people's emotion and connecting with others. So we got to use that towards our advantage, and just stay human. And I know it's super like vague and abstract, and it's hard to understand like how we can weave that into our existing workflows. But that's part of the work that we need to do and figure out.
We all know how important user research is, but it can often suck up the time you'd rather be spending making your product shine. Ping Pong is a user research platform that automates the admin work so you can focus on having deep, meaningful conversations with your users. Run user tests and interviews on the platform so you can iterate faster, gather more insights, and build more usable products that your customers will love and trust. If you want to give Ping Pong a try, simply go to userdefenders.com/pingpong and use promo code UserDefenders to get 25% off your first purchase. Yeah, absolutely, Jasmine. And you know what? I've got to say, your CEO is one of the most inspirational figures in this movement that I've heard of in at least a decade. Every time I hear about something that he's doing or something that he's implemented in the company for accessibility and inclusion, it's like, dang, dude, like I'm inspired. You all are in a good place with this guy at the helm.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for him, and I have a lot of like hope. The fact that you're working on this stuff that scares me as a creative person. Like, I know we'll always be able to do whatever we want, but that the industry is moving at such a pace to where it's not going to make as much sense for us to push pixels around. That bothers me a little bit just because I'm used to it. It takes me out of my comfort zone. But what gives me hope is knowing that your CEO has a complete passion for human beings and has demonstrated that with, again, the accessibility, with the Xbox initiatives for disabled people. Like, I'm so inspired, and I learned a lot about this in Kat Holmes' amazing book called Mismatch. And again, and just many things I've seen. So that was me just saying, like, I feel a lot of hope now, knowing, and as long as he stays where he's at and keeps moving things forward, you know, like, what do you think of that?
Yeah, he's done a great job. We also have he's created this like AI and ethics team at Microsoft. And I think this is huge. Like, I think every company should have some sort of AI and related ethics team, because that's part of our job. Like, we can't just rely on algorithms, and a lot of people blindly just accept algorithms as truth. But in the end, someone needs to make an ethical guideline for how those algorithms react. So he's set the right standards, and hopefully other companies will follow as well.
That's so great. What's his name again?
Satya Nadella.
Thank you. I am curious about what we do. What do we do now, right? We know this, and you have, again, in your really enlightening and slightly scary article, you have enlightened us to the fact that we need to do something about this, and there's no better time than the present, right? To kind of stay ahead. How do we do that? And this is kind of a hybrid of our listener question from Julian Pops, who said, "What's our best bet for remaining employed?" Like, any thoughts on how we pivot? And I want to add to his question and kind of say, like, what are the best ways? Like, do we need to learn AI or we will be left behind? How do we learn behavioral design? How do we learn systems design? Like, that's a lot. I just threw a lot at you, and I apologize, but if you want to synthesize that for us and just give us kind of your best advice for what we do now with this information.
Sure. My best advice are two things. So first, this is what I've been trying to do, is understanding existing AI applications and tools. And you don't have to learn like machine learning. I mean, if you want to go ahead and do a deep dive, but as designers, if you just want a cursory overview, then I would look at the existing APIs. Like, there's Amazon Intelligence API, Google Cloud AI API, Microsoft Cognitive Services, and they have really good documentation. And if you just scroll through those, you can get a sense of what kinds of inputs and logics are used to train the AI models. And I think it's so crucial for designers to understand the breadth of applications. Another thing is weaving in adaptability as a as a key design principle. When you design, you're designing for a certain product and experience at a particular setting. But with AI, it helps designs that learn and change depending on multivariables. So I've tried to shift my mindset when I design so that I'm not designing for a product at a certain, it's just a static product, but I always try to think about how is this going to dynamically adapt depending on the changing context and varying users' decisions. And the first step is just putting forward adaptability as one of the design principles.
That's fascinating. What do you mean by adaptability? What does that look like?
Adaptability, so it's inferring to how products could change based on different inputs. So, for example, let's say I'm designing for an iOS application and a random fitness app. Instead of designing the app for a particular user, and people do this right now, where you design for a group of users and maybe segments of users. But I think in the future with AI, we have much more flexibility on how the product could change over time and how it could scale over time. So it's not just designing for a product at a particular time, but more or less a length of time.
Yeah, there's a lot to stay ahead of here. And I guess I want to know, you mentioned the looking into the APIs, and definitely will link to those. If I can find those links, I'll link to those. But I also want to know about, are there books we should be reading? Are there classes we should be taking? Should we be looking into psychology? Should we be looking into behavioral design? Do you have resources that you can throw at us that we can link to and inspire the defenders to check out?
Mm-hmm. I think it's always helpful to know more of the higher level, the trends and where we're headed. So I've been looking at media. I think UX Collective, they have a great series of articles called AI and the Future of UX on Medium. There's 20 or so articles, and you can go through them, and they touch on different points about AI and our role as designers. So that's a great source. Another one, I'm just thinking about what you said earlier about how, it's kind of sad younger generations have less respect for elders, and, everyone's plugged into their phones and everyone's just sucked into their screen. And it reminds me, so Dieter Rams, who used to be a designer for Brown, and I think a lot of his earlier designs inspired the early generations of iPod. Anyways, he has a documentary and he has tons of interviews as well. But he basically in his documentary says how people don't think when they design anymore. People don't think when you consume either. It just comes and goes, thoughts come and go, and you don't have time to even process because you're on to the next thing. And I think everyone should look at that documentary because it's just a good reality check, and it helps us straighten out our priorities as designers.
Yeah, I love Dieter Rams, and he's one of those pillars of design, and his philosophies even, I want to share just his 10 principles for good design. I just want to read those right now. You've inspired me. So he's got really 10 famous principles for design, and you can dig into more to what these mean, but I'll just run through them. Number 1, good design is innovative. Number 2, good design makes a product useful. Number 3, good design is aesthetic. Number 4, good design makes a product understandable. Number 5, good design is unobtrusive. Number 6, good design is honest. Number 7, good design is long-lasting. Number 8, good design is thorough down to the last detail. Number 9, good design is environmentally friendly. And number 10, which might be one of my favorites, good design is as little design as possible.
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
This episode is also made possible by something super cool, an alternative to the .com domain name. It's the, drumroll please, .design domain name. Try saying that 5 times fast. So if you're a designer, and I know you are, and you've thought of a sweet name for your website that just isn't available under .com, check out .design. Chances are the perfect domain name you want is waiting for you on a bearskin rug. Okay, maybe not the rug, but wouldn't that be great? Head to userdefenders.com/porkbun now and use coupon code DEFENDERS on the checkout page to get literally a free year of a .design domain name bundled with free email hosting, Whois privacy, and even SSL certs. Don't wait. Grab your .design domain name now before someone else does. Go to userdefenders.com/porkbun now and use coupon code DEFENDERS. So let's wrap up the show with the imparting of superpowers. Jasmine, what's your design superpower?
I think my superpower would be being comfortable in ambiguity. Like in an incubation team, it's just inevitable not to have ambiguous problem space. And the part that excites me is like understanding the amorphous problem space and like weaving through the unknown variables and drawing meaningful associations and shaping the hypothesis. So I guess that's my superpower.
That's a really good one. What is your design kryptonite, adversely?
Kryptonite. This is also related to the working process we have, but like earlier on in the conception phase, you have to just try a bunch of things, and oftentimes like we do mild to wild approach. And I think my kryptonite is that sometimes you just don't have time to explore like a bunch of design options, but I still want to. And I have to keep like reminding myself to pick and choose the most optimal solutions. And it also applies to like presenting work, like when you're meeting with partners and you just spend like 3 days, night and day, creating these design solutions. Obviously, you want to show everything, but no one has time. And I try to suppress my eagerness and put forward the leading candidate and summarize it in the best way possible.
It's been said to kill our darlings.
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? As designers, like we really fall in love with our creations often, right? And it's like they're kind of like babies to us, you know? And so, but as truly creative people, especially in UX and in design, we have to be willing to sacrifice our creations in favor of what the most optimal solution would be, like you just said. Like, yes, but this looks so much better. Yeah, you know what? Ugly wins sometimes.
Yeah.
And I learned that the hard way. I was like, mine looks so much better than the Control. But guess what? Control won. People liked ugly. There was something about it that made it easier to run through. I don't know. That's another part of the psychology, trying to understand human beings, understand the brain and our motivations and everything. So that's part of the intrigue and that ambiguity that you just said too before this about being comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Mm-hmm. This is a fun one. What would your UX superhero name be?
So this is related to the former 2 points, but detangle and weave, like kind of like a spider, like maybe detangling a bunch of, messy associations and then straightening out and then weaving it again, like visualizing in my head.
That's cool. I like that a lot. And don't be surprised if my artist Eli Jorgensen makes your superhero costume kind of like Black Widow's. So I think I read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read this, and I think you said this. It's something about when stakeholders bring a user problem, a quote unquote user problem that may not be a problem at all. Like that's kind of how you detangle and weave. Where did I read that? Did I read that in your article?
I mentioned that as a superpower.
Oh yes. You mentioned that in the pre-interview that we did. Yeah. So I'm really curious. I want to know, because I think we can all benefit from your experience here. What are your tips for us? Like when stakeholders bring a quote unquote user problem that may not actually be a problem at all, how do we unearth that? How do we detangle and weave? Or what have you found has been the most successful way to kind of detangle and weave those scenarios?
Yeah, I run into this all the time. Like a PM could propose a project based on a user problem that might not be a problem in the first place, or maybe the problem scope is too narrow. And in those cases, I would say the best bet is to ask him, like, well, has this been validated? What is the supporting data? And in the beginning, I was always afraid to ask for data, but my manager, I think, told me, like, why don't you just ask for data and like look at it yourself? And now I do this all the time. I would say, where is the supporting data? And it's funny because a lot of the times it's so easy to pick and choose data to support your hypothesis. Also, stakeholders can give you very filtered data. So you need to be sure to understand like what set of data they're looking into. And don't be afraid to ask, for more if you need more data, and to help and to make them explain it to you.
Hi there, this is Alexa Lee Herasmchuk. I'm a product designer who's curious about why people do what they do. And you're listening to User Defenders Podcast with Jasmine Oh.
So good. I think it's called cognitive bias. Confirmation. It's confirmation bias. Uh-huh. And we do that all the time. Like if we're having a political or religious argument, we'll look on Google and we'll be like, I only want the documents that support my belief.
Exactly. And
right?
The other side of the story. It
goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about on the show lately. And Lex Roman has been on the show a couple of times. She did a training recently with our User Defenders community, and it was really, really good. It's about growth design. And that is really another one of those areas right alongside systems and behavioral design is growth. And we need to really be kind of looking at that too, because we are at the end of the day, we're trying to keep our business afloat, and actually not just floating, but forging ahead, moving ahead. And we have to, as designers, we have to understand the data better. We have to dig into it. We have to be concerned with it. And that's the only way we can really, truly affect change at the business level. So I really like that a lot. That's great advice, Jasmine. If you could recommend one book to our listeners, what would it be and why?
I feel like I'm very guilty of not reading as many books. I always just read a bunch of articles. Like Medium is my go-to. And I follow a bunch of designers. I follow Julie Zhou. I think she's a VP of design at Facebook. She has a great series of articles for IC designers and managers. So I follow her. I follow John Maeda, and he has a video series as well as I think articles that explains what you can do to be a more successful designer.
What's one habit that contributes to your success, Jasmine?
One habit. I always like to seek for good metaphors. So as a designer, a lot of the times, especially if you're explaining an abstract idea, metaphors come in so handy. And plus, it just leaves a better, a visual memory or a distinct memory in the listeners as well. So whenever I hear a good metaphor, I just write it down on my phone. Or whenever when I'm reading articles, whenever I see a good phrase talking about tech or design, I write those down and I recycle them. So that's a good habit to have as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if it worked for the Son of God, it will work for you.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus told more parables than he did facts. And people remember stories. People remember stories more than facts. Muriel Rukeyser said, the universe is made of stories, not atoms.
Exactly. Sometimes you would give an hour presentation and you would have just one metaphor that you dropped in the middle of the presentation. And later on, people just remembered that metaphor,
Yes, because they felt something.
Exactly.
I love it. And that's really the premise of this show. I wanted to make this less about how to and more about why to. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the best way to do that is to tell stories and people remember that better. So I like that. I think I just gave away the secret sauce to my show here. Uh-oh.
Everyone knows it.
Lastly, what's your best advice for aspiring UX superheroes? You did give us some great advice, but I'm curious if you have anything else you want to leave with us before we go.
the best thing. Like I'm still an early IC designer, and I remember when I was a student, I cold called so many people. Like you can go on Google, you can look up your university name plus UX design or product design, interaction design, plus the company that you want to apply for or the company that you're interested in. And just, I think, especially early on in the career when you're just looking for jobs, you might not know what you're interested in. And it's great to talk to designers in a variety of industries. So, or varying sizes of companies like large corporates, design agencies, startups, or startup-like teams in large corporates. It gives you a good sense of what fits your interests and your working style and where you might want to go next.
That's awesome. Well, Jasmine, this has been incredibly deep and incredibly insightful and just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I appreciate, again, you making the time to do this. There's a lot of value in this episode, and I think it's definitely future-proofed. Let's put it that way. Like this is definitely reference material, and I think there may be even some prophecy in here as we listen back maybe 5 years from now. I think it's going to be interesting to watch this all unfold. And I think no matter where things go as designers and defenders listening, I think the most important thing is to always be growing. Just never, ever stop being interested in your personal growth. And that has to do with your health. That has to do with your boundaries around your technology, like we said earlier. That has especially to do with your knowledge and your experience in doing this stuff. So I always say, we're either growing or dying. So just keep growing, right? I mean, we're like plants. We're either growing or dying.
Yeah.
And so keep growing. Thanks, Jasmine. Tell us real quick before we go, what's the best way for our defenders to connect and to keep up with you?
Yeah. I'm not super big on Twitter, but I am on Instagram. So my handle is Jasoh Design, Jasoh and Design. So you can contact me through that, or I'm also on Medium under Jasmine Oh.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Jasmine, again for doing this, and I just want to encourage you to keep defining what the future of computing looks like at Microsoft, because we need you. We need you to do that. Because I can tell you have that passion for humanity, for staying human, and making sure that the machines stay fit on a healthy diet of empathy and humanity. And so please keep doing that. And I want to say, last but not least, fight on, my friend. It seems like robots have been a looming threat to humans ever since the creation of the mechanical chess-playing Turk in the late 1700s. Although this turned out to be a hoax with a chess master neatly stowed away inside the machine, the idea that artificial intelligence could best us and eventually replace us is certainly nothing new. I still have very vivid memories of watching Twilight Zone Thanksgiving marathons as a kid growing up in the 80s. The episodes that both mesmerized and terrified me at the same time were the ones that had robots in it. Robots created with so much promise to be our servants, even our friends. Robots that would eventually turn on us after the reveal that they were far more intelligent and autonomous than we bargained for, much to our demise. I don't want to sensationalize this too much because I still feel like we're a long way off before AI can reason and rationalize more like humans, let alone to create cohesive UX solutions for other humans and nudge us out of the product lifecycle completely. Honestly, I'm not convinced AI will ever be able to do this well. There's just far too much ambiguity and nuance for biased zeros and ones to handle. Even if our UX designer jobs as we know it will one day become obsolete, there will always be need for humans who excel in soft skills to influence AI. As a result of this reality, I will always preach the gospel of empathy, humanity, and humility. I say this with a healthy dose of hope that robots will always need us more than we will ever need them. Google Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws of Robots. If you're listening to this 20 plus years into the future and this ends up coming true, where AI has maybe not fully taken, but certainly evolved our jobs into ones where we are essentially feeding their face and tossing milkshakes like White Goodman at the end of Dodgeball? Please, for the sake of humanity and a humane future, continue to feed them with a healthy diet of humanity, empathy, and humility. Tweet your takeaways, Defenders. I am at User Defenders and Jasmine is at Jazz Oh Design. I want to take a second just to express my sincere gratitude for 2 new patrons to the show. First of all, Tiffany Vurek. Tiffany, you are awesome. You're an amazing contributor to the User Defenders community and our book clubs, and I just appreciate your support so much. So thank you so much for becoming a patron. And Todd Libby. Todd, you are also awesome, and I'm so grateful that I'm getting to know you better through the community now that you're a member, through your patronage, and also through Twitter. And man, like I said, eat one of them lobster sandwiches from me. Todd lives out there in Maine, so he's got some pretty good access to those. I was going to see if he could bring me one to an event apart in Denver, which I have the great privilege of recording a live podcast at the end of October. By the way, come on out if you can swing it with your employer. You can get $100 off using coupon code AEAUD. But it's going to be an amazing conference, and Todd's going to come out, and Todd's going to get a big bear hug. I promised. And so that's going to happen. Thanks, Todd, for becoming a patron. And also, Defenders listening, if you want to jump in and become a patron of this show, I would greatly appreciate it. And you also get some cool perks. So I will tell you one of the best ones it happens at the lowest tier of $5 a month, and that is early ad-free episodes. So check it out. Go to userdefenders.com/Patreon, and you can see some of those tiers offered. Todd's at the master tier. You can't go any higher than that. So Todd gets one-on-one consulting with me every month and a bunch of other cool stuff as well. Check it out. I want to also direct your attention. I mentioned it in the beginning of the show. We have some amazing merch out there for you. It's got logos, UD symbols. It's got some other cool stuff. There's 2 custom shirts on there now, and more to come, I'm sure. And so check it out. Go to userdefenders.com/shop and buy something, for Pete's sake. I'd love to have you repping UD wherever you happen to be. I want to thank Eli Jorgensen for the astonishing artwork, as always. And so I'm going to thank sponsors. We have some amazing sponsors this season. Optimal Workshop, thank you, Ping Pong, and Pork Bun. 3 awesome sponsors. You can check out their offers at the show notes, userdefenders.com/065 will take you there. And you can also see, again, Eli's awesome artwork of Jasmine that he did. So in 2 weeks, Defenders, I am super excited and delighted to tell you that I have an extremely special episode coming with the one and only Jeffrey Zeldman. I will be honest with you, he's so busy now. He has a full-time job over at Automatic, helping to shape WordPress, their design initiative over there. And so I really I labored to make this happen. I probably spent over a month trying to get him to come on the show to do this, and he's just a busy guy, and so it's understandable. But I'm glad I didn't give up, and we recorded an incredible episode coming at you in 2 weeks. The title of it is Web Design Dead? So there's definitely going to be, that's probably tickling your ears, maybe provoking you a little bit. And so I hope that you will stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed at userdefenders.com/subscribe. Thanks for hanging in there on this long outro. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your enthusiasm for this show. You are why I do this. So until next time, fight on, my friends.